If you want to understand why 130 million Americans are walking around with dangerously elevated blood pressure despite spending billions on medications every single year, don't look at their pill bottles, don't look at their salt intake, look at what's missing from their breakfast table every single morning. A single deep purple root vegetable that costs less than $3 takes 5 minutes to prepare and triggers a cardiovascular reset so profound that researchers measured blood pressure dropping from stage 2 hypertension to normal range in 72 hours. Not 72 weeks, 72 hours. Hi, I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and cardiovascular researcher. And after nearly 15 years in emergency departments watching the catastrophic endpoints of uncontrolled hypertension, strokes that leave people unable to speak, heart attacks in people who thought they were managing their numbers, kidney failure requiring dialysis 3 times weekly, I have become convinced that we've been approaching blood pressure completely backwards. We treat the measurement. We don't address the mechanism. Here's a number that should stop you cold. By the time most people are diagnosed with hypertension and handed a prescription, their endothelial cells, the delicate inner lining of every single blood vessel in the body, have already sustained years of cumulative damage. That damage doesn't show up on a blood pressure cuff. It shows up in the emergency room 5, 10, 15 years later when compensatory mechanisms finally collapse. And here's what makes this particularly urgent. Researchers now estimate that 47% of American adults have hypertension. That's nearly half the adult population walking around with blood vessels under constant destructive pressure. And the standard approach, take this pill every day for the rest of your life, addresses the symptom while the underlying vascular dysfunction continues silently progressing. Most people have been told the same thing. Eat less salt. Lose some weight, exercise more, take your medication. And if one medication doesn't work, we'll add a second one, then a third. I've had patients on 5 different blood pressure medications simultaneously. 5. And their numbers still weren't controlled. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying cardiovascular physiology, I've observed something that completely contradicts that simplistic approach. The people who reverse hypertension, not just manage it, reverse it, aren't doing it with more medications or stricter sodium restriction. They're doing it by restoring something their blood vessels lost years ago. A molecule your body is supposed to produce naturally in abundance, but stops making efficiently somewhere in your 30s and 40s. Think of your cardiovascular system not as static plumbing, but as a living dynamic network. Your blood vessels aren't rigid tubes. They're responsive tissue that constantly adjusts diameter based on moment-to-moment demands. When you stand up, vessels in your legs constrict slightly to maintain blood flow to your brain. When you exercise, vessels in your muscles dilate to deliver oxygen. This constant adjustment requires a signaling molecule that tells vessel walls when to relax and when to tighten. That molecule is nitric oxide. And here's what most people never hear from their doctor. Nitric oxide production declines by approximately 50% between age 40 and age 70. 50%. Your blood vessels are essentially operating with half the control signals they need. And when vessels can't dilate properly, your heart compensates by pumping harder, and that elevated pressure becomes your new baseline. Now here's where conventional medicine gets it backwards. We treat elevated pressure as if pressure itself is the problem. But pressure is the symptom. The problem is endothelial dysfunction. The problem is insufficient nitric oxide. The problem is blood vessels that have lost the ability to relax, and you cannot restore that ability with a diuretic or a beta blocker. Those medications force the pressure down through various mechanisms, blocking hormones, eliminating fluid, slowing heart rate, but they don't repair the underlying dysfunction. It's like turning down your car's temperature gauge while the engine continues overheating. The number looks better. The problem continues, and the one food at the center of restoring that lost function, most Americans walk right past it in the produce section without a second glance. One specific root vegetable, deep purple, dirt cheap, available at any grocery store that contains the precise precursor compound your body needs to restore nitric oxide production to levels you haven't experienced in decades. And we're not talking about modest improvement. We're talking about measurable blood pressure reduction, beginning within hours of first consumption and reaching clinical significance. Multiple studies document this within 72 hours. Before I explain the exact mechanism and the specific protocol, I want you to understand why this works when medications often don't. In populations where this root vegetable is consumed daily, either as whole food or concentrated juice, cardiovascular disease rates are dramatically lower than in Western populations with comparable age demographics. Researchers analyzing dietary patterns in Northern Europe, particularly populations with traditional beetroot consumption, found hypertension rates nearly 30% lower than comparable populations without this dietary staple. 30%. That's not genetics. That's not healthcare access. That's a specific dietary pattern, delivering a specific biological compound that Western populations are systematically deficient in. The root vegetable is beetroot. And before you dismiss this as another wellness trend that got co-opted by the supplement industry, understand that the research here is not testimonial. It is peer-reviewed, mechanistic, replicated across multiple independent research groups, and increasingly prescribed by cardiologists who understand vascular physiology at the molecular level. Here's what happens when you consume beetroot and why the effect is so rapid and so measurable. Beetroot contains exceptionally high concentrations of dietary nitrate, not nitrite, not nitric oxide directly, nitrate. And your body has a conversion pathway that transforms dietary nitrate into nitric oxide through a precise sequence. When you consume beetroot juice or whole beetroot, your saliva begins the conversion process immediately. Bacteria on your tongue, beneficial bacteria that exist specifically for this purpose, reduce nitrate to nitrite. You swallow that nitrite. In the acidic environment of your stomach, nitrite converts to nitric oxide. That nitric oxide is absorbed directly into your bloodstream and begins circulating to every blood vessel in your body within minutes. Now here's why this matters specifically for blood pressure. Nitric oxide does something pharmaceutical medications cannot do. It activates an enzyme called endothelial nitric oxide synthase, or ENOS. Think of ENOS as the biological switch that tells your blood vessel smooth muscle to relax. When ENOS is activated, it triggers a cascade inside the smooth muscle cells that line your arteries. Calcium channels close. Muscle fibers release tension. The vessel diameter increases, and when vessel diameter increases even slightly, blood pressure drops significantly because of basic fluid dynamics. A 10% increase in vessel diameter reduces resistance to blood flow by roughly 40%. Let me translate that into what you feel. Within 2 to 3 hours of consuming beetroot juice, your vessels begin dilating. Blood flow to your extremities improves. You might notice your hands and feet feel warmer. Blood flow to your brain improves. Mental clarity often increases noticeably. Blood flow to your kidneys improves, which triggers a secondary mechanism we'll discuss. And your heart doesn't have to work as hard to push blood through a now wider vascular network, so your blood pressure begins dropping toward normal range. Researchers at the University of Reading in the United Kingdom recruited 68 adults with documented hypertension, defined as systolic pressure above 140 or diastolic above 90, and divided them into 2 groups. One group consumed 250 milliliters of beetroot juice daily. The control group consumed a nitrate-depleted placebo juice identical in appearance and taste. Over 14 days, using 24-hour ambulatory blood pressure monitoring, the gold standard for measuring blood pressure because it captures readings throughout normal daily activity rather than single clinic measurements, the beetroot group showed an average reduction of 8.1 millimeters of mercury in systolic pressure and 3.8 millimeters of mercury in diastolic pressure. But here's what's remarkable. The effect began within 3 hours of first consumption and reached maximum effect by day 3, 72 hours. That's not a drug building up to therapeutic levels. That's a biological system that was waiting for the specific molecule it needed to function correctly. The second mechanism is equally important and explains why the effect compounds over time rather than plateauing. Nitric oxide doesn't just cause immediate vasodilation. It also protects and repairs the endothelial cells themselves. Think of your endothelial lining like the smooth Teflon coating inside your blood vessels. When that lining is healthy, blood flows smoothly, clotting factors don't stick, inflammatory markers don't accumulate, and pressure remains stable. But when the endothelium is damaged, through years of elevated blood sugar, chronic inflammation, oxidative stress from processed foods, smoking, or simply age-related decline, the surface becomes rough and sticky. Platelets begin adhering, small clots form, inflammatory cells infiltrate, and the vessel wall begins thickening and stiffening. Nitric oxide acts as a protective shield for endothelial cells. It reduces oxidative stress by neutralizing free radicals before they can damage cellular membranes. It prevents inflammatory signaling molecules from activating inside the endothelial cells. And it maintains something called endothelial permeability, which determines how easily nutrients pass from blood into surrounding tissue and how easily waste products pass back out. When permeability is disrupted, fluid accumulates in tissue spaces, contributing to edema and further elevating blood pressure. Penn State University researchers published findings from a study involving 146 adults with documented endothelial dysfunction, measured using flow-mediated dilation, the clinical gold standard for assessing how well blood vessels can expand in response to increased blood flow. Participants consumed concentrated beetroot juice, providing approximately 400 milligrams of nitrate daily for 6 weeks. Using high-resolution ultrasound to measure arterial flexibility, researchers documented a 28% improvement in flow-mediated dilation scores. 28% improvement in the vessel's ability to respond appropriately to demand. That's not just symptom management, that's restoration of function. The third mechanism involves your kidneys and explains why beetroot addresses blood pressure through multiple simultaneous pathways. Your kidneys are not just filters. They are your body's primary blood pressure regulation system. When blood pressure is too high, healthy kidneys respond by eliminating more sodium and water, which reduces blood volume and therefore reduces pressure. But when kidneys are exposed to chronically elevated pressure, they sustain damage to the delicate filtering structures called nephrons. Damaged nephrons can't regulate sodium properly. They start retaining it. Sodium retention causes water retention. Water retention increases blood volume. Increased blood volume raises pressure further. This creates a vicious cycle where kidney damage causes the very condition that causes more kidney damage. Nitric oxide breaks that cycle. It dilates the afferent arterioles, the tiny vessels that bring blood into the kidney's filtering units. This dilation reduces pressure inside the glomeruli, the actual filtering structures, which protects them from damage while simultaneously improving filtration efficiency. Better filtration means better sodium elimination. Better sodium elimination means lower blood volume. Lower blood volume means lower blood pressure. And because this happens through restored physiological function, rather than forced diuresis from a medication, the effect is sustainable without depleting potassium or other essential electrolytes. Researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden analyzed dietary nitrate intake and kidney function markers in over 3,000 adults tracked for 12 years. Those in the highest quartile of dietary nitrate consumption, equivalent to consuming beetroot or high nitrate vegetables daily, showed 42% lower rates of chronic kidney disease progression compared to the lowest quartile. 42%. That difference isn't medication. It's a single dietary pattern maintained consistently over time. Now, let me give you the exact protocol based on what the clinical research tells us produces measurable results. This is not complicated. This is not expensive. This does not require exotic ingredients or specialized equipment. But precision matters here because the dose, timing, and preparation method all influence how much bioavailable nitrate actually reaches your bloodstream and converts to nitric oxide. The optimal dose is 200 to 250 milliliters of pure beetroot juice, which is approximately 1 cup, consumed first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. Why first thing in the morning? Because your cortisol awakening response, the natural spike in cortisol that occurs in the first hour after waking, creates an ideal hormonal environment for nitric oxide production and utilization. Cortisol temporarily increases blood pressure, which is why many people experience their highest readings in the morning hours. By consuming beetroot juice during this window, you're meeting that morning surge with immediate vascular support. You can use either cold-pressed beetroot juice or whole roasted beetroot blended smooth. If using whole beetroot, use 2 medium-sized beetroots, approximately 300 grams total weight. Roast them at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 45 minutes until tender. Let them cool, remove skins, blend with 100 milliliters of water until completely smooth, and consume immediately. Do not add sugar, honey, or sweet fruits. The addition of simple sugars triggers an insulin response that temporarily impairs nitric oxide signaling. Do not add citrus. The high acidity can interfere with the bacterial conversion of nitrate to nitrite in your mouth. Timing is critical. Drink your beetroot juice or smoothie within 30 minutes of waking. Do not consume coffee, tea, or food for at least 45 minutes after. Why? Because you need to preserve the oral bacteria that perform the initial nitrate to nitrite conversion. Antibacterial mouthwash, which many people use first thing in the morning, destroys these bacteria and can reduce the blood pressure lowering effect by up to 90%. If you use mouthwash, delay it until at least 2 hours after consuming beetroot. Better yet, eliminate antibacterial mouthwash entirely. It's destroying bacteria your cardiovascular system depends on. Here are 6 clinical details from 15 years of working with patients on this protocol that make the difference between modest results and transformative ones. First, do not brush your teeth immediately before consuming beetroot. Toothpaste contains antibacterial compounds that linger in your mouth and reduce bacterial nitrate conversion. Brush your teeth at least 20 minutes before or wait until after the 45-minute absorption window. Second, if you're taking proton pump inhibitors for acid reflux, understand that these medications reduce stomach acid, which is necessary for converting nitrite to nitric oxide. You'll still get benefit, but the effect may be blunted by approximately 30%. Work with your doctor on whether you actually need the PPI or whether dietary modifications could address the reflux at its root. Third, stay hydrated throughout the morning. Dehydration reduces blood volume, which the body compensates for by constricting blood vessels. If you're dehydrated, your vessels are fighting the signal to dilate. Drink 16 ounces of water within 2 hours of your beetroot consumption. Fourth, do not cook your beetroot in water and then discard the water. Nitrates are water-soluble. If you boil beetroot and pour out the water, you're pouring out the active compound. Roasting preserves nitrate content. Steaming is acceptable. Boiling and draining is not. Fifth, check your urine color approximately 4 hours after consumption. Beetroot contains pigments called betalains that many people excrete in urine, turning it pink or red. This is completely harmless and actually serves as a useful marker. If your urine turns pink, it confirms your digestive system is processing the beetroot and the compounds are entering your bloodstream. If your urine doesn't change color, it doesn't mean the beetroot isn't working. Some people metabolize betalains differently, but the color change is a helpful confirmation for many. Sixth, if you experience any digestive discomfort, mild cramping, or loose stools in the first few days, this typically indicates your gut microbiome is adjusting to increased nitrate and fiber intake. Start with half the dose, 125 milliliters of juice or 1 medium beetroot for the first 3 days, then increase to the full dose. The adjustment period is temporary. Now let me tell you the mistakes that cancel out the benefits, because I see these constantly. First mistake is inconsistent consumption. Nitric oxide has a biological half-life of only seconds to minutes. It doesn't accumulate. It doesn't build up in your system. You need to provide the precursor daily to maintain sustained effect. Consuming beetroot 3 days a week will give you 3 days of benefit and 4 days of elevated pressure. Daily consumption is not optional if you want sustained blood pressure control. Second mistake is combining with nitric oxide blocking medications without medical supervision. If you're taking erectile dysfunction medications, nitrates for angina, or certain migraine medications, all of which work through nitric oxide pathways, adding concentrated beetroot could cause excessive blood pressure drops. Work with your physician to adjust medication timing or dosing. Third mistake is expecting instant permanent results. Yes, you will see measurable blood pressure reduction within 72 hours. But if you stop consuming beetroot, your pressure will return to previous levels within 48 to 72 hours. This is not a 3-day cure. This is a daily practice that maintains vascular function. Fourth mistake is continuing a high-sodium processed food diet and expecting beetroot to compensate. Beetroot provides the signaling molecule for vasodilation. But if you're consuming 4,000 milligrams of sodium daily from processed foods, you're creating opposing pressure through fluid retention. The beetroot will help, but you're fighting yourself. Fifth mistake is using beetroot powder supplements without checking nitrate content. Many beetroot powders are heat processed, which degrades nitrates significantly. If you choose to use powder rather than fresh beetroot or juice, verify the product list's actual nitrate content in milligrams per serving. You need at least 300 to 400 milligrams of nitrate to achieve clinical effect. Sixth mistake is drinking beetroot juice hours before bed. Remember, nitric oxide improves blood flow systemically. That includes blood flow to your brain. For some people, consuming beetroot in the evening creates a subtle stimulating effect that interferes with sleep onset. Morning consumption avoids this issue entirely and aligns with your body's natural cortisol rhythm. Let me bring it all together clearly. Your blood pressure is not a life sentence. It is not genetic destiny. It is the measurable output of whether your blood vessels have the molecular tools they need to function correctly. For most people walking around with stage 1 or stage 2 hypertension, the primary missing tool is nitric oxide. Your body knows how to make it. You made abundant amounts of it in your 20s and 30s, but production declined as endothelial function declined. And conventional medicine gave you pills that forced the numbers down without addressing why production declined in the first place. Beetroot provides the specific precursor compound, dietary nitrate, that your body converts through a well-documented pathway into the exact molecule, nitric oxide, that restores vascular function. This is not theoretical. This is measured. Researchers have documented the timeline. Blood pressure begins dropping within 3 hours, reaches clinical significance within 72 hours, and produces sustained reduction with daily consumption. They've documented the mechanisms: ENOS activation, endothelial protection, improved kidney function. They've documented the magnitude: 8 to 10 millimeters of mercury reduction in systolic pressure, 4 to 6 millimeters reduction in diastolic pressure, sufficient to move many people from hypertensive to normal range without medication. You are not powerless. You are not dependent on pharmaceutical intervention for the rest of your life unless you choose to be. Your blood vessels exist in you right now. The biological machinery for nitric oxide production exists in you right now. The only question is whether you give your body what it needs to activate that machinery. 1 cup of beetroot juice, first thing every morning, costs approximately $2.50. That is less than a single blood pressure medication copay. And it addresses the mechanism rather than just managing the symptom. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you double check right now? It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who want real science-based cardiovascular health information rather than just prescription pads. If this protocol makes sense to you, if you understand why restoring nitric oxide is fundamentally different from blocking beta receptors or forcing diuresis, please share this video with someone you care about who's struggling with blood pressure. Text them the link right now. The people who need this information most are the ones who've been told there's no option except lifelong medication. In my next video, I'm breaking down the second most underestimated factor in vascular health, one that has nothing to do with diet and everything to do with a specific type of breathing pattern that most people abandoned somewhere around age 12. Check out my previous videos, where I go deep on the foods that are silently damaging your endothelial lining right now, and exactly what to replace them with. Your cardiovascular system is a living, responsive network. It can heal. It can restore function, but only if you give it the tools it needs. Those tools are not exotic. They're not expensive. They're sitting in your grocery store right now. Start tomorrow morning. 72 hours from now, you'll have your answer. Dr. Leana out.